Hello and welcome to Curtis Stage Tutorials. This tutorial is on CSS positions, and we're going to talk about using floats and using the position attribute. So the first thing we'll talk about is floats. I have a CSS document over here. Well, let's look at our design. I've got a header, this orange bar up top, and then I have a green column of text and a yellow column of text. And notice the yellow column of text is underneath the green one. It's doing what it's supposed to do at this point. It's cascading down in order from the top down on the left-hand side of the page, and it's coming after the green one. And if I look at my code view, you can see that my main text, which is the green text, is coming before my right text, which is the yellow text. So the main text is coming before the right text in cascading order in the HTML area of my document. Both of those two divs, which again, div is a division, and these just happen to be classes, and a class means you can use it multiple times, and an ID would mean you'd use it maybe once on a page. So these just happen to be classes. Both of these div classes are inside content. They're hanging out in there, and that's going to become important when we talk about floats. So my content up here has no height in it and no width, but my container has a height and width of 960 by 700. I'm going to give my content a height here just so we can see it of 700. And I'm actually going to give it a different color background so that we can kind of see the two boxes floating in the inside it. So I'm going to say background dash color and semicolon and go here, or colon, and give it a color, maybe a light there, and semicolon to end that. If I go to design view, you can see now that my content box is this kind of light gray, and these two boxes are sitting inside of it. Okay, I want to move the yellow one up to the right. First way, we'll do it through floats. So if I go down here to my right text and I tell it to float, here, I'll get this out of here. If I tell it to float and I say right, so you'll see the pop-up come up here, and I'll say right and semicolon. You'll notice when I go to design view, it does float to the right. The only issue is that it's following in line after the green one. So the yellow one is doing what it's supposed to do. It's floating over to the right, but its height is dependent on what came before it. So, you know, it's going to be down lower than this one. It's going to come down, the top of it's going to be at the bottom of the green one. Okay, so I have it floating right. Well, that works pretty well. What happens if I guess I could get this to go up here if I float the main text left. So if I go here and I say float and I pick left on that, then I could get that box to come up. See, now it's coming up. It's not following the orders of this guy. So this one's floating left, this one's floating right. Now what does the float do? Essentially what happens with the float is it takes the object outside of the flow of the CSS. And I think of CSS as like a waterfall cascading down, and the code goes in order, like I said, top down on the left-hand side by default. And when you float objects, it takes them out of the order, it takes them out of the flow of the document. So the float can work here, and I can get it even more situated by moving this yellow box off the right-hand side. I can margin that. So if I go to the right text and I say, well, how about a margin dash right, and give that, let's say, 50px with a semicolon. Then I go to design view. Look how it comes off the right hand side here. Well, that's pretty good. So I can kind of manage these two by doing the floats. Here we go. I'm going to go back to code view. So if I take this and instead of floating it right, I float it left, and then I go to design view. Notice what happens here. I can make them go in a horizontal line across my page. We've done this in other tutorials where you can make things kind of happen horizontally along a page by using the floats. So I'm making columns up like this. This gets tricky though in a couple respects because, like I said, the the objects are floating outside of they're outside the flow of the document, that really what that means is the parent div doesn't understand where the child divs are in relationship with themselves, and they won't expand their heights. Well, you say, well, Curtis, this gray box is expanded here, but watch if I take the height off of it. If I go up here to content that's holding these two children divs, and I take off a height and I go back to design view, look at how high it is. It's just one carriage return height here, and the two divs are still in the right place, but the parent that's holding them does not know that these are inside them. Remember, IDs and classes, their height, a div, is determined by what objects are inside it. In other words, if I go to this header and I type an L and I type another L and I type another L, then the header would expand if I had it, no height on it. Let's see, I have the header on here with a height. The header would expand according to what I've typed on the screen. So that's pretty good. Right? I mean, I see how my header now will contract depending on what I have. By floating, what happens is that the parent does not understand what the children are doing, and that can create some problems in your design. Okay, so let's go back and let's go back and look at this code a little bit closer here. So I've got the margin right. I can take that off, and I could say margin left, and that'll move it off the left-hand side of the box that's next to it. So if I go margin left, then you can see the yellow box margins off the green box. And when I click right on the edge here, you can see that Dreamweaver shows me the spacing here. Look, I have my mouse there. It says margin 50, and it's margining off of the object that's before it. So the yellow box is thinking the green box is like a big brother, and it's following in line with it. So if the green box is floated left, the yellow box floated left will mean they'll line up horizontally in line. And then I can margin the yellow box 50 on the left-hand side, it'll margin off of the one prior to it. And if I margin it 100 off the top, it's actually margining off of the top of the box to the left. All right, there's another way we can do this. The floats are good, but they can present some problems in terms of just kind of getting yourself lined up exactly right. And also the problem is with the parent. Once again, parent divs don't understand where the children div are in relationship to themselves, right? So we can use positioning to kind of fix that. So watch what I do here. I'm going to go to code view, and I'm going to take off what we did for this. I'm going to take off these two guys here, take off that on the right text, and I'm going to go here to the main, take off the float off that, and the content still doesn't have any size here. So when I do that, look at that. My size of my content box expanded to fit both of these two kids that are inside it. The children inside the parent are now fitting in the gray box. You see how that expanded back out again? So I don't need to have a height in the content. There it is right there, no height, and it will expand. That's really good for web design. Okay, so what if I want to take this and move it the other way through positioning? So okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the right text class, and I'm going to put a position on that first. Position, and I'm going to pick absolute for that, and semicolon. Okay, nothing's going to happen yet to it. It hasn't moved yet. And I'm going to tell it then to be positioned, not margin, but I'm going to tell it top and colon and 0px, semicolon. And then I'm going to tell it to position on the right, let's say 100px and semicolon. All right, and then I go here. Now, right now it went up and it did move, but it's in the wrong spot, and I'll explain why in a second. Let me go back and go to split view now, and let's see what's happening here. If I go here to back up to my CSS code, and I've got the position absolute, and I've picked a top and a right. Now what I'm going to do is go to the box that's holding this yellow box. So the right text box is being contained by the content box. Content is holding main text and right text. So I'm going to go up to content, and I'm going to give it a position. if I could spell right. I'm going to give it a position, and I'm going to give it a position of relative. Okay. As soon as I do that, watch how my yellow box moves into place. Pretty cool. It just moved over, looks like it's in a better position now. Well, what happened here? Essentially, by positioning this yellow box absolute, I'm giving it XY coordinates. Now, XY coordinates are usually in absolute positioning based off 0, 0. So X, 0, and Y, 0 would be the upper left-hand top corner of my website. Well, I have top 0, so why isn't this yellow box in the very top? Because this right text, this yellow box, is sitting inside the gray box. The gray box is content. Well, and since I positioned the content relative, it's saying look for anything that has a position of absolute inside there, and the numbers that are associated with it will now be referring to the box that it's in. So position absolute with this yellow box is saying go 0 off the top of the gray box, now not the body of the page, and 100 from the right hand side of the gray box. Pretty cool. If I don't have the position relative on content, watch when I take that off. Let me take that back off on the box that's holding it. So if I don't have the position relative, I hit delete. Look what happens to my yellow box. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's going top 0, and it's going to be 100 off the side of off the right hand side of the browser. Watch when I go here to Safari and I click save. Now when I open and close my browser window, look what happens. The yellow box is always absolute positioned to 100 off the top of the browser, which is really the body of the website, and 100 off the side here, off the right-hand side of the browser. It has no relationship whatsoever to the divs that are sitting around it. In fact, its green brother over here, it has no idea what that is. It doesn't even know it's coming after it now. It's way outside the flow of the document. And it's not even adhering to getting below the header or getting inside the content box anymore. It's kind of sidestepping all of that and going outside and just only referring to the body of the document. Again, if I go back up to the CSS code and put the content in there, position relative on the parent, okay, so the content is the parent, so position relative, and I set this up first. Then it will go into place, and I can even move it down a little bit. I can even say top about 10, and watch when I make it 10 pixels. Watch the yellow box move down. It moved down 10 pixels, not off the orange box. I mean, that's a little deceiving. It's 10 pixels down from the top of the gray box. Look, and when I click it here, you can see the blue outline around it and how it's kind of coming down 10 pixels off the top of that. So it's almost like padding. So it's pretty cool in here, and when I go and test it in Safari, it's not going to do the funky thing it just did before because it's inside the parent. The yellow box now knows that it's supposed to be in the parent because the parent's set up as a relative. If you think about it as this parent-child relationship, the parent being set up as a relative, anything that's inside it now has to go off of its coordinates. So we're basically telling the content, we're not giving it XY coordinates, its position. We're going to just say it's the parent here, and the parent, look for any child that's in it. Oh, here's a child in it. It's positioned absolute. Okay, well, where's the position? 10 off the top, 100 off the right. Perfect. So it's no longer going to look for the body, because that's what it did when I took off position relative here. It was looking for the body of this page. As soon as I did that, it's going to go up here and it's going to position off the body up here. It's going to go up here and it's going to say by default, even though there's no relative position in the body, it's going to just do it no matter what. So relative positioning and absolute positioning are pretty useful in moving stuff around. Okay, so position, absolute, and relative are pretty important, and they're good. You can use both. You can use either one, floats or positioning, to move your div boxes around. The one good thing about positioning is that, again, the parent element controls the child more, and so within the CSS, the parent then knows the height of the children objects and will expand to that height. Again, the gray box is the height here because this child is in it. So that's what's kind of important about that is when I float these, this gray box would shrink because it wouldn't know the height of these two objects unless I define a height for the content. But I usually want that to be a pretty flexible box there, so I usually don't want to define a height if I can get away with it. All right, so that is positioning within CSS using floats and the position elements. And this has been a Curtis Day tutorial. We'll see you soon.